Hello, it's Natasha N.K.O, 27th July, 15:10 p.m. Continuing to read N.K.O. People of the Lie, Chapter 4, which is Charlene, a teaching case. I'm on page 184, subsection A Law unto Herself. By now, Charlene's wilfulness had become evident. Yet the depths of that wilfulness still did not become clear until the third year of her therapy, when I realised that Charlene was actually autistic. Mental health requires that the human will submit itself to something higher than itself. To function decently in this world, we must submit ourselves to some principle that takes precedence over what we might want at any given moment. For the religious, this principle is God, and so they will say, "Thy will, not mine, be done." But if they are sane, even the non-religious submit themselves, whether they know it or not, to some higher power, be it truth or love, the needs of others, or the demands of reality. As I defined it in The Road Less Travelled, there's a note, Simon and Schuster, 1978. As I defined it in The Road Less Travelled, mental health is an ongoing process of dedication to reality at all costs. The utter failure to submit oneself to reality is called autism. The word comes from the Greek root auto, meaning self. The person who is autistic is oblivious to certain essential dimensions of reality. Such people literally live in a world of their own, in which the self reigns supreme. When I asked Charlene why she wanted sex with me, her answer was always perfectly simple. Because I love you. Although I repeatedly raised the issue of its genuineness, to Charlene the reality of her love was unquestionable. To me, however, it was autistic. When she gave me a different check each month, she thought she was doing so for me. In her mind, there was some connection between me and the particular pattern of that month's check. But the connection was all in her mind. The reality was not only that I couldn't have cared less which pattern she used, but also that her selection had nothing to do with the reality of me. As far as she was concerned, Charlene loved everyone. The cult to which she belonged espoused as its principal doctrine the love of mankind. Charlene saw herself proceeding through the world, spreading gifts and gentle kindness wherever she walked. My own experience of her love, however, was that it invariably excluded the reality of me. One winter evening, for instance, a few minutes after we had completed the session, I made myself a martini and went into the living room, ready to settle down by the fire for a rather rare time of relaxation in which I could get caught up with my mail. I heard the grinding noise of someone repeatedly attempting to start a car. I went outside. It was Charlene. "I don't know what's wrong," she said. "I can't get it started." "You're not out of gas, are you?" I asked. "Oh, I don't think that could be it," she replied. "You don't think... What does the gas gauge read?" "Oh, that reads empty," Charlene answered gaily. I might have laughed if I'd not been annoyed. "Since your gauge reads empty, what makes you think you're not out of gas?" "Oh, it always reads empty." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It always reads empty? Is it broken?" "No, at least I don't think so. You see, I never buy more than a couple of gallons at a time. That way I'll be sure not to waste any. Besides, it's fun to guess when I need some more. I'm pretty good at it." "How often do you guess wrong and run out?" I asked in amazement at the discovery of this new extraordinary ritual. "Oh, not often. Maybe 3 or 4 times a year." "And I don't suppose it's possible this could be one of those times," I said with an edge of sarcasm. "What are you going to do now?" "If I can come in and use your phone, I'll call AAA. Charlene, it's 9 o'clock at night and we're way out in the country. What do you think they're going to do about it?" "Well, sometimes they come out at night. The only other thing I could do is borrow some gas from you." "I'm afraid I don't have any extra gas lying around," I replied. "We could siphon some out of your car, couldn't we?" Charlene asked. "I suppose so," I acknowledged, "except I don't think we have anything to siphon with." "Oh, I have a siphon tube," Charlene answered brightly. "I keep it in the trunk. I always like to be prepared." So I searched for a pail and a funnel. Then I used her siphon tube, getting a mouthful of gasoline in order to initiate the suction. I gave her a gallon. Her car started right up and she drove off. I was very cold when I came in. My martini was warm and diluted. I couldn't taste it for the gasoline. I couldn't taste anything for the rest of the evening except gasoline. The bad taste she had literally left in my mouth. 2 days later, Charlene came in for her next session. She mentioned nothing of the debacle following her previous one. Finally, I asked her how she'd felt about what had happened. "Oh, I thought it was neat," she replied. "I really enjoyed it." "You enjoyed it?" I queried. "Sure, it was exciting. It was kind of like an adventure, figuring out how to siphon the gasoline and get the car started. And we shared it together. Do you know, that's the first time we've ever actually done anything together. It was fun working with you out there in the dark." "How do you think I felt about it?" I asked. "I don't know. I assume you enjoyed it too." "Why do you assume that?" "I don't know why. Didn't you enjoy it?" "Charlene," I asked, "did the thought ever cross your mind that I might have had something else to do the other evening rather than help you start your car? Something I might have wanted to do more?" "No. I thought people liked to help other people. At least I do. Don't you?" "Charlene," I asked again, "were you at any time during the incident uncomfortable or embarrassed? Did you feel bad at all about having to use my help to get out of a mess that you were responsible for?" "Oh, it wasn't my fault." "It wasn't?" "No," Charlene stated flatly. "The car had less gas in it than I thought. That's not my fault. I suppose you might say that I should have estimated better, but on the whole, I do pretty well. As I told you, I only run out 3 or 4 times a year. That's a pretty good average." "Charlene," I said, "I've been driving 3 times as long as you, and I've never run out of gas." "Well, apparently not running out of gas is a big deal to you. I mean, you're really uptight about it. It's not my fault you're so uptight about it." I gave up. For the moment, I was just too tired of batting my head against the impregnable walls of Charlene's obliviousness. As far as she was concerned, my feelings did not really exist. Autism is narcissism in its ultimate form. For the complete narcissist, others have no more psychologic reality than a piece of furniture. Narcissists have only what Martin Buber calls eye-to-eye relationships. While I have no doubt Charlene truly believed that she loved me, her love was all in her head. It did not exist as any objective reality. To herself, she was a light unto the people, emanating joy and happiness wherever she went. All that I and others experienced of her, however, was the irritating chaos and confusion she invariably left in her wake. Charlene didn't stumble into chairs, but it was more than just me or other people to which she was oblivious. She was, for instance, continually getting lost when she drove any significant distance. This symptom puzzled me for the longest time, perhaps because the answer was so obvious. But as soon as I became aware of her autism, the puzzle was simple. Complaining that on the previous day she had ended up in Newburgh, New York, when she had intended to go to New York City, I commented, "It sounds as if you missed a turnoff from Interstate 84 onto Interstate 684. "That's it," Charlene exclaimed happily. "It was 684 I wanted." "But you've been that way to New York City a number of times, and the turn is clearly marked. How could you have missed it?" "Well, I was humming a tune, and I was trying to figure it out in my head." "So you weren't concentrating?" "That's what I just told you, isn't it?" Charlene responded, annoyed. "Since you're always getting lost," I persisted, "maybe the problem isn't always the same. Maybe you just don't pay attention to road signs." "Well, I can't do 2 things at once. I can't work out a tune and be expected to concentrate on road signs at the same time." There was a note earlier about the eye-to-eye relationships. It says, "See Buber's I and Thou, trans, Walter Kaufman, Charles Schreiber's Sons, 1970. "Correct," I said. "You can't play your own tune, so to speak, and expect the highway department to dance to it. If you don't want to get lost, you have to pay attention to signs. If you want to lose yourself in fantasy, then you're going to get lost in relation to the external world. I'm sorry, Charlene, but that's the way it is." Charlene jumped off the couch. This session is not going the way I intended it, she said coldly. I do not intend to lie here and be harangued like a child. I will see you next week. It was not the first time Charlene had walked out of a session. Still, I pleaded with her. Charlene, you've got more than half your time left. Please stay and let's try to work it out. It's a very important issue. But my office door slammed irrevocably shut. I began at this point also to understand another one of Charlene's symptoms. Her inability to hold a job for more than a few months. During our 2.5 years together, until this point, Charlene had held 4 different positions, which were interspersed with long periods of unemployment. On the eve of starting a 5th job, I asked her, "Are you nervous?" She looked genuinely surprised. "No, why should I be? If I was starting a new job, I'd be nervous," I said. "Particularly if I'd been fired so many times before. I'd be scared I wouldn't be able to succeed. Actually, I'm a bit scared whenever I go into any new situation in which I don't know the rules." "But I do know the rules," Charlene countered. I looked at her dumbfounded. "How can you know the rules of a job you haven't even begun?" "My job's to be an aide at a state school for the retarded. The woman who hired me said the patients are like children. I know all about how to take care of children. After all, I had a younger sister, and I was a Sunday school teacher, wasn't I?" Exploring the issue further, I gradually realised that Charlene was never nervous when entering any new situation because she always knew the rules beforehand, because she herself always made them up. The fact that they were her rules and not her employer's never seemed to matter to her, nor the fact that confusion inevitably resulted. Playing by her predetermined rules, with utter disregard for the way her employers wanted things done, she could never understand why people on the job soon became annoyed with her, and in relatively short order, totally fed up, if not frankly furious. "People are so unkind," she would explain. She repeatedly complained that I too was unkind. Charlene placed great stock in kindness. The reason she had been unable to graduate from college similarly became clear. Charlene seldom produced her papers when they were due, and when she did, they were seldom on the subject assigned. A psychologist to whom I had referred Charlene for consultation described her as having an IQ that would sink a battleship. Yet she had flunked out of a mediocre college. Repeatedly, I attempted to explain to her, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, how her disregard of others was at the core of her failures, and how self-destructive was her extreme narcissism. But the world is too inflexible, was the closest she ever came to acknowledging the problem, and unkind. Toward the end of therapy, the problem was elucidated theologically as well as psychologically. "Everything seems meaningless," Charlene complained to me one day. "What is the meaning of life?" I asked her with seeming innocence. "How should I know?" she replied with obvious irritation. "You're a dedicated religious person," I responded. "Surely your religion must have something to say about the meaning of life." "You're trying to trap me," Charlene countered. "That's right," I acknowledged. "I am trying to trap you into seeing your problem clearly. What does your religion hold to be the meaning of life?" "I'm not a Christian," Charlene proclaimed. "My religion speaks of love, not of meaning." "Well, what do Christians say as to the meaning of life? Even if it isn't what you believe, at least it's a model." "I'm not interested in models." "You were raised in a Christian church. You spent almost 2 years as a professional teacher of Christian doctrine," I went on, goading her. "Surely you're not so dumb as to be unaware of what Christians say is the meaning of life, the purpose of human existence." "We exist for the glory of God," Charlene said in a flat, low monotone, as if she were sullenly repeating an alien catechism, learned by rote and extracted from her at gunpoint. "The purpose of our life is to glorify God." "Well?" I asked. There was a short silence. For a brief moment I thought she might cry. The one time in our work together. "I cannot do it. There's no room for me in that. That will be my death," she said in a quavering voice. Then, with a suddenness that frightened me, what seemed to be her choked-back sobs turned into a roar. "I don't want to live for God. I will not. I want to live for me, my own sake." It was another session in the middle of which Charlene walked out. I felt a terrible pity for her. I wanted to cry, but my own tears would not come. Oh God, she's so alone, was all I could whisper. The Dream of the Marvellous Machine. Page 191. Throughout our work together, Charlene steadfastly maintained her insistence, not only that she loved me, but also that she wanted to be well. I had long ago come to suspect that both were pretenses, although most likely pretenses she herself believed. There's a note that says, "It is perhaps not without significance that Malachi Martin, in Hostage to the Devil, has labelled the first, longest, and most difficult stage of an exorcism the pretense." Whether or not she was conceivably possessed, Charlene's pretense was penetrated only by her own unconscious. It was never acknowledged by her consciously. So, I had long ago come to suspect that both were pretenses, although most likely pretenses she herself believed. The unconscious, however, has a beautiful and tenacious tendency to speak the truth. So it was near the end that Charlene's unconscious did seem to reveal to me with quite striking clarity the reality of our relationship. I had a dream last night, Charlene recounted at the beginning of her 4th year in therapy. It took place on another planet. My people were at war with an alien race. For a long time it had been unclear who would win the war, but I had constructed a marvellous machine that was both offensive and defensive. It was enormous and very complicated, with many different weapon systems. It could shoot torpedoes underwater, fire rockets for great distances, spray chemicals, and do many other things. With it we knew we could win the war. I was in the process of putting the finishing touches on this machine in my laboratory when a man came in. He was an alien, one of our enemy. I knew that he had come to try and destroy my machine before we could put it to use, but I was not alarmed. I felt supremely confident. There seemed to be plenty of time. I thought I would have sex with him and then could get rid of him before he got to the machine. There was a couch on one side of my laboratory. We lay down on it and began to make love. But then, just as we were getting into it, he suddenly jumped up from the couch and ran to the machine to attack it. I dashed over and began to push the buttons that would activate the defensive weapon systems, which would kill him and blast him away. But they didn't work. I hadn't quite finished checking them, and I hadn't test-fired them before. I pushed buttons and pulled levers frantically. In the midst of doing this, I awoke in great agitation. It was unclear when I awoke whether I would succeed in repelling his sneak attack or whether he would succeed in destroying my beautiful machine. One of the many remarkable things about this dream was Charlene's violent reaction to its interpretation. "What is your predominant feeling about the dream?" I asked. "The one you had after you woke." "Fury. I was furious." "What were you most furious about?" "The trickster," Charlene replied. "The man cheated me. He seemed willing to go to bed with me. I thought he cared for me. But then, just as my senses were lulled, he left off and started attacking my machine. He pretended that he cared for me, but all he was after all along was the machine. He tricked me. He used me." "But weren't you using him and deceiving him just as much?" I asked. "How do you mean?" "Well, you knew he was after your machine in the first place," I explained. "I'm not sure why you should be so upset with him when he was simply doing what you knew he'd come there to do. And it seems to me that you were attempting to deceive him by taking him to bed. While you apparently wanted him sexually, I don't hear in the dream that you cared for him. Indeed, it was your intent to get rid of him, perhaps even kill him once the sex was over. You described it as something you thought you could get away with." "No, he tricked me," Charlene insisted. "He pretended that he loved me and he really didn't." "Whom do you suppose he represented?" I asked. "Oh, it could be you. He looked something like you. Blonde and tall," Charlene answered. "I figured it was probably you as soon as I was fully awake." "So do you think you're angry at me for deceiving you?" Charlene looked at me as if I were an idiot stating the obvious. "Of course I'm angry at you. You know that. I tell you all the time that you don't care for me enough. You almost never sympathise with me. You make very little effort to understand what I feel. And I won't make our relationship a sexual one." "Yes, and you won't do that either." "But I'm not trying to deceive you about that," I commented. "I've made it very clear that I have no intention of relating with you sexually." But you're deceptive when you say you care for me, Charlene maintained. I dare say you honestly do think you care for me, but that's just you deceiving yourself. You're always so self-satisfied anyway. You'd be much different if you really cared for me. It's a man in a dream. If the man in the dream represents me, I asked, what do you think the machine represents? The machine? Yes, the machine. Well, I hadn't thought about that, Charlene responded with some confusion. I suppose it might represent my intelligence. You certainly do have a formidable intelligence, I commented. And I do think that you and your therapy are trying to undermine my intelligence. Charlene was obviously warming up to this interpretation. I've told you that. You've sometimes even made me begin to believe things I don't believe. You do try to rob me of my intelligence and my will. But in a dream, your intelligence seems to be devoted entirely to combat, I remarked. It's filled with these offensive and defensive weapons. It serves you only as a weapon. Well, I do need to have my wits about me in dealing with you, Charlene responded happily. You're pretty intelligent too, a rather formidable opponent. Why do I have to be your opponent, I asked. Charlene looked stunned. Well, in the dream, you're my opponent, aren't you? She finally said. You're trying to destroy my machine. Suppose instead of representing your intelligence, I suggested, the machine represents your neurosis. It's true that I'm trying to destroy your neurosis. Charlene bellowed. No. It was a no of such force and power that I shrank back into my chair. No? I asked weakly. No, it's not my neurosis. Again, I felt blasted back into my chair. To this day, I do not know how loudly Charlene said this, but I felt as if she had screamed at me with all the intensity of which a human voice could possibly be capable. Why do you say it's not your neurosis? I finally inquired, fearful of her wrath. Because it was beautiful, Charlene wailed. She went on, almost crooning to the image of the machine. My machine was a thing of beauty. It was intricate. It was intricate beyond belief. It could do so many things. It had been constructed with such care and ingenuity. It had so many levels and operations. It was a masterpiece of engineering. He should never have attempted to destroy it. It was the most beautiful thing ever made. But it didn't work, I added quietly. Charlene screamed again. It did work. It would have worked. I just hadn't had enough time. All I needed was a little more time to test it. It would have worked beautifully. I only needed to put the finishing touches to it. I really do think the machine represents your neurosis, Charlene, I said. Your neurosis is large and complicated. You have constructed it over many, many years. It does serve many functions for you, but it's cumbersome and constantly tripping you up and not working when you need it. And it keeps you from being close to people, for it was built for warfare, to protect you from people. As you probably needed to be protected from your parents. But you don't need such protection now. You need to be open to people, not to be at war with them. You don't need that machine. It's getting in your way. It's only a weapon system designed solely for warfare, to keep people away. It was not designed just for warfare, Charlene howled, like a beast wounded. It did other things too. It had many peaceful uses as well. Like what? I asked. Charlene again looked confused. For a moment she seemed to be searching her memory, and then with utter seriousness and apparent genuineness, she proclaimed, well, for instance, down near the bottom there was a part that could repair damaged cuticles. You know, like on your toenails. It was very helpful that way. Almost involuntarily, I did something that I probably should not have done. I laughed. Charlene jumped off the couch. The machine is not a neurosis, she declared in cold, regal fury. You are not to refer to it as such again, and this session is now terminated. Within a second, before I could even remonstrate, she was out of the office and gone once again. Charlene returned on schedule for her next appointment, and she continued in therapy for 6 months. But we never got any further than the attempt to interpret this dream. We worked on this or that without success, and whenever I attempted to return to the dream, she refused. She was quite serious when she said that I was not to refer to it again. No win, page 196. Charlene had cast me in her dream as an enemy alien. In reality, I was no stranger to her. She had been seeing me 2 to 4 times each week for over 3 years. I believe I had done my best to be loving and to fully earn the substantial sums she paid me. She herself said and believed that she loved me. Yet her unconscious, that reservoir of truth in us all, labelled me an enemy and alien. In a way, I perceived her similarly. When I recoiled from her embraces, it was, I think, partly out of a fear for my own safety. Must I not therefore have perceived her on some level as an enemy? Moreover, there existed in Charlene something that, try as I might, I never came to understand, and with which I was never able to empathise. She was, I suppose, as alien to me as I to her. She perpetually accused me of being unkind and unsympathetic, and I often wondered if she might not be right, that perhaps I should have referred her to a different, somehow more empathic therapist. But I didn't know anyone who seemed better suited, and in fact, she had failed with a previous therapist and was to fail with my successors. Be that as it may, there were many times when Charlene seemed to be moved by desires beyond my comprehension, motives so obscure as to be out of the range of my human experience. More than anything else, it is this inhuman something, out of reach of ordinary psychodynamic understanding, that I have labelled, rightly or wrongly, evil. But I cannot be absolutely certain whether it was alien to me because it was evil, or whether I called it evil because it was so alien. I can think of no better way to sum up this incomprehensible, this alien something, than to describe Charlene's response to the weather. She had no enthusiasm whatsoever for spring or autumn days of sunshine, or for the loveliest of sunsets. Only one type of weather pleased her: grey days. Then she came in whistling. Charlene liked grey days, not the soft, misty days of autumn when the leaves fall quietly, not days of summer along the coast when the fog swirls around in great blowing sheets, but the ordinary, dullest grey days, the kind of days you are likely to get in New England in the middle of March, when winter has left its detritus on the ground, broken, rotten tree limbs, mud-slurped earth and filthy patches of decaying snow. The days of unrelieved grey, the dismal days. Why did Charlene love these ugliest days that everyone else hates? Did she love them because they made the rest of us miserable? Or did she love them for her own ugliness and vibrate to something in them so utterly alien that we have no name for it? I do not know. Fearfully, because I have never done so with any patient before, I did confront Charlene that last year with what seemed to me to be her evil. The first time was several months before her dream of the magnificent machine. Charlene, I told her, you go around creating chaos and confusion in the world and in here in your therapy. You used to claim it was accidental. Now we've learned it is often your intention to do so. But I still don't understand why it's your intention. Because it's fun. Fun? Yes, it's fun to confuse you. I've told you, it gives me a sense of power. But wouldn't it be more fun, I asked, to get a sense of power out of being genuinely competent? I don't think so. Does it bother you that you're having this fun at the expense of other people? No. Maybe it would if I seriously hurt somebody, but I don't, do I? Charlene was right. She never did seriously hurt anyone else, as far as I knew. She just annoyed the hell out of everyone, and it did hurt herself. Why should she enjoy it? It seemed to me I ought to press on. Charlene, I said, even though your destructiveness may be minor, it still seems to me that there's something, well, something evil about your delight in it. I suppose you could say that, Charlene responded blandly. Charlene, I can't believe you, I retorted. Here I've virtually called you evil, and you don't seem the least bit upset by it. So what do you want me to do about it? Well, you could begin by feeling bad about the possibility that you're evil. Do you happen to know of a good exorcist in the neighbourhood? Charlene suddenly asked. I was totally unprepared for the question. No, I acknowledged lamely. What's the point of getting all upset about it then? Charlene asked cheerfully. I felt dizzy, almost punch drunk, as if I'd just badly lost a round in a boxing match to a vastly superior fighter. I retreated, but I began, for the first time in my life, to study the phenomena of possession and exorcism. It all seemed bizarre. I really did not know what to make of my reading on the subject. I did, however, learn that at least a few of the writers I read seemed not only sane, but responsible and caring. I decided to try again 4 months later. Charlene, do you remember a few months ago when you asked me if I knew of a good exorcist? I asked. Sure, I remember everything we talk about. Well, I still don't know of one, but I've been reading up on the subject. I believe I could help you find one if you wanted. Thanks, but I'm more into bioenergetics at the moment. Damn it, Charlene, I almost exploded. We're talking about the issue of evil, not some little tension or anxiety. The issue isn't a little blemish. The issue is something very ugly. And I told you, Charlene said archly. I'm interested in bioenergetics. I'm not interested in exorcism. Period. I do wonder, however, how you can possibly work with me if you think I'm evil. How can you affirm me? How can you give me the sympathy I need? It's what I've been saying all along. You don't really care for me. I retreated again and returned over and over again to confront her willfulness, self-centeredness, self-destructiveness, and failures. Over and over again to urge her to regress, to let me love her as a child, to let me care for her in the only way I could, on the only terms that seemed healthy. It was all I knew how to do. But as I now expected, nothing changed. I didn't know how else to proceed except to wait, with less and less hope for a miracle. Sick though she was in psychiatric terms, Charlene could hardly be called unstable. To the contrary, she was frighteningly stable, impervious to her autism, immutable. Among all the things about her that did not change was her refusal to submit to the rules of therapy and the requirements for honesty. Although she had chosen from time to time to reveal this or that, she continued throughout to withhold most of the crucial information that would have made genuine therapy possible. She remained in control of almost every session until the end. It was to any absolute amazement, therefore, when one afternoon she came in for the 421st session, lay down on the couch, and for the next 50 minutes proceeded to tell me smoothly and honestly exactly what she was thinking and feeling. No one had ever done better. For those 50 minutes, she was a perfect patient. Except unknown to me, she was still withholding what was most crucial. With 5 minutes to go in the session, I expressed my amazement and appreciation at how well she had done. I thought you'd be pleased, she said. But what happened, I asked, to suddenly cause you to behave so differently in here, to freely tell me things instead of turning the session into a fight and struggle? I wanted to show you that I could do it, she replied, that I can free associate and follow the rules just like you want me to. Well, you've certainly done that, I answered. It was beautiful. I hope you'll be able to continue. No, I won't. Won't what? I asked dumbly. Won't do it again. This is our last session. I've decided not to return. You're not the right therapist for me. There were 30 seconds left in the session. I attempted to remonstrate. No, she would not return to discuss the matter. My next patient was waiting. I kept him waiting for 15 minutes, but she would not budge. She had decided she needed a less rigid therapist, and that was all there was to it. Finally, I had to let her leave. I wrote her several letters, but I never saw her again. It was a remarkable tour de force. Evil and Power, page 201. It was also remarkably petty. Charlene's desire to make a conquest of me, to toy with me, to utterly control our relationship knew no bounds. It seemed to be a desire for power purely for its own sake. She did not want power in order to improve society, to care for her family, to make herself a more effective person, or in any way to accomplish anything creative. Her thirst for power was unsubordinated to anything higher than itself. Consequently, it was totally tasteless. There was a kind of artistry with which she could operate, such as her talent for timing when she brought down the curtain on our relationship. but the artistry had no grand design. Unsubmitted even to the requirements of plot, it lacked coherence. The performance was ultimately meaningless. Because of this silly, petty quality to her life, Charlene may not seem an important character. The only consequence of her role in the drama of life was a string of merely minor annoyances she caused one employer after another. But suppose she had been the employer rather than the employee. Suppose she had inherited not a small trust fund, but a whole corporation to manage with her devious destructiveness. Or more feasibly, simply suppose that Charlene became a mother. Then the rather ridiculous, bumbling comedy of her life would be suddenly transformed into an ugly tragedy. At one point I defined evil as the exercise of political power, that is, the imposition of one's will upon others by overt or covert coercion, in order to avoid spiritual growth. What made Charlie's existence more of a slapstick comedy than a gruesome tragedy was the mere fact that she possessed virtually no political power to exercise. Give her a husband and she would likely have become a Sarah. Give her a child and she would likely have been a Mrs. R. Give her a nation and she would likely have been a Hitler or an Idi Amin. Because their willfulness is so extraordinary and always accompanied by a lust for power, I suspect that the evil are more likely than most to politically aggrandize themselves. Yet at the same time, being unsubmitted, their extreme willfulness is likely to lead them into political debacles. It is conceivable to me that there may have been deep inside some hidden instinct for goodness in Charlene that led her to avoid successful mating or the quest for authority over others. Certainly I have known many people who have medically or socially sterilized themselves precisely because of an awareness that they would make incompetent parents. So I do not know for sure whether Charlene was such a politically impotent person because she was the less or because she was the more evil. All evidence pointed to utter willfulness as the sole cause of her failure to be effectively wicked, but I would like to give her the benefit of the doubt. Be that as it may, Charlene was a failure. Whatever the reason that she was no major villain, she was utterly unable to be creative. Whether or not it was a blessing in disguise, her impotence was still impotence, and impotence is no laughing matter. I have used the metaphor of comedy to describe her ineffectiveness. Now that its usefulness is at an end, I want to retract the metaphor. I do not think Charlene was funny in her impotence. I do not think it is funny when any human being is less of a human being than he or she can be. Intellectually brilliant, Charlene was infinitely less. Although apparently quite happy as she ploughed through life, leaving a wake of minor chaos behind her, and remarkably content with her impotence, I think she was one of the saddest people I have ever met. And I am sad that I couldn't help her. Whether or not her coming for help was a lie, she still came to me. She needed, and hence deserved, more than I could give her at the time. Her impotence and failure were my own. If I had to do it over again, page 203. When I worked with Charlene, I knew practically nothing about radical human evil. I did not believe in the existence of either the devil or the phenomenon of possession. I had never attended an exorcism. I had never heard of the word deliverance. The very name of evil was absent from my professional vocabulary. I had received no training on the subject. It was not a recognized field of study for a psychiatrist or, for that matter, any supposedly scientific person. I had been taught that all psychopathology could be explained in terms of known diseases or psychodynamics and was properly labelled and encompassed in the standard diagnostic and statistical manual. The fact that American psychiatry almost totally ignored even the basic reality of the human will had not yet struck me as ridiculous. No one had ever told me of a case like Charlene. Nothing had prepared me for her. I was like an infant. I cut my eye teeth on Charlene. She was, without question, one of the major beginnings of this book. What I learned through Charlene and during the years since is insignificant in relation to what needs to be known about human evil. But it is enough that, had I to do it over again, I would work with Charlene very differently, and conceivably our work might succeed. First of all, I would make the diagnosis of evil in Charlene's case with both far greater rapidity and far greater confidence. I would not be misled by her obsessive compulsive features into thinking that I was dealing with an ordinary neurosis, or by her autism into considering for months whether or not I had uncovered a strange variant of schizophrenia. I would not spend 9 months in confusion or over a year making useless, edible interpretations. When I did finally come to the conclusion that Charlene's most basic and real problem was evil, I did so very tentatively, and when I confronted her with it, I did so without any sense of authority. I do not believe that the diagnosis of evil is one that should be made lightly. Nonetheless, all that I have learned since has confirmed my belief. Nonetheless, all that I have learned since has confirmed my then tentative conclusions. Had I to do it over again, I believe I could put my finger on Charlene's problem in 3 months instead of 3 years, and with a firmness that might possibly be healing. I would begin with my confusion. I know now that one of the characteristics of evil is its desire to confuse. I had been aware of my confusion within a month of beginning work with Charlene, but assumed it to be my stupidity. I never entertained the notion in the first year that possibly I was confused because she wanted to confuse me. Today I would make that as a possible hypothesis and begin to test it quite quickly. Had I done that kind of testing with Charlene, it is more than likely that the diagnosis would have evolved in short order. Might not such a cool competence in dealing with her case have driven Charlene right out of treatment? Yes, it is a distinct possibility. We must ask why Charlene came into treatment in the first place. Her avowed reason that she wanted to help was never manifested. What was evident was a desire to toy with me and seduce me. Then we must ask why she stayed in treatment as long as she did. Here again, the answer would seem to be that in my naivety and willingness to take her at face value, I offered her the ongoing pleasure of playing with me and the ongoing hope that she could succeed in seducing me, possessing me, or conquering me. Last, we must ask why Charlene finally left treatment when she did. The most obvious conjecture would be that as I increasingly got her number, the possibility of my seduction became more and more hopeless, and her capacity to toy with me more and more limited. Had it become clear early in the course of our work that I not only recognised her evil but had the power to combat it, it is indeed quite possible that Charlene would have beat a hasty retreat from an engagement she so obviously could not win. But if she had, would such an outcome not be preferable to what did transpire? Certainly it would have saved her thousands of dollars. I cannot see that there is any virtue in a 4-year treatment failure over a 4-month treatment failure. I believe, however, that there is an even chance that Charlene would have stayed in therapy. I believe this for 3 reasons. One reason is that I suspect Charlene was not irredeemably evil. We must bear in mind that it is highly uncharacteristic for the evil to ever subject themselves to the searing light of psychotherapy. It is possible Charlene took the risk out of the strength of her desire to beat me. It is also possible that she took the risk because a part of her, a small part to be sure, did indeed want help. It is possible that her evil was not of the thoroughbred variety. Actually, the 2 possibilities are not at all mutually exclusive. People are often of 2 minds, and at least some who are evil may be ambivalently so. My leading hypothesis is that Charlene entered treatment out of both a desire to conquer me and a desire to be healed. Still, the part of her that desired conquest seemed the larger. How then can I suppose that had I responded to her more knowledgeably, she would ever have allowed herself to be conquered? That she could ever have lost the battle in order to win her soul? One reason is the issue of authority. I have learned these past years that evil, whether it be demonic or human, is surprisingly obedient to authority. Why this is so I do not know, but I know that it is so. Let me stress that authority over the power of evil does not come easily. It is gained by enormous exertion in addition to knowledge. Such exertion can be born only of love. I believe that when I worked with Charlene, I had the love, but it was useless without the knowledge. Now that I have the knowledge, I would take her on again, gladly, if I had the chance, but I will shudder at the energy that would be required of me. Genuine love is always ultimately sacrificial. There are no words strong enough to describe the matter. I never had the confidence to do true battle with Charlene's evil. I know now that he or she who would do true battle with evil must expect to be depleted beyond imagination, perhaps even beyond recovery. So I would today take quick but not easy authority over Charlene's evil, and out of my newfound knowledge, I would do something else I did not do before. I would address her fear. I have earlier pointed out that the evil are to be pitied, not hated, because they live their lives in sheer terror. On the surface, Charlene appeared fearless. She was not afraid of the things that usually makes us humans anxious: running out of gas, missing the exit on the freeway, entering on a new job. But now I know her superficial, almost silly equanimity masked depths of terror known to few. Her insistence on controlling every aspect of our relationship was rooted in panic, the dread that she might lose control of it. God knows what might happen to her if she allowed herself to be in the care of an alien. Her demand that I affirm her stemmed from the fear that she was unaffirmable, the demand that I love her from the terror that I would not freely do so. So I would go for her fear. I would expose it to her. I would sympathize with her. God, Charlene, I would say, I don't know how you can live with all that terror. I surely wouldn't want to be in your shoes. I don't envy you your constant dread. At the time, I wasn't able to give Charlene the sympathy she often demanded. Today I would be. Of course, she might utterly reject the terms on which it was given. On the other hand, it would be a very genuine compassion that I would offer, and through it she might come to realize that she did indeed desperately need healing. Finally, I would offer her that healing. When I was working with her, I felt almost overwhelmed by Charlene's sickness. I wasn't sure I had the power to cure her. Now, in fact, I know that I alone did not and still do not have the power, and that the psychoanalytic method I used was not wholly the right approach to her. Then I knew no other way to go. Today is different. I do know another approach, far more appropriate and possibly effective in such a case. Today, if I could see evidence that a healthy part of her wanted the whole to be healed, I would, with conviction and authority, offer Charlene the possible means of her salvation, deliverance, and exorcism. Excellent. Wow, I've got a lot I could say about that, so I might record a rambling of my thoughts and experience on that stuff. Thank you for listening.